cocktail sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
Hi, everyone. So how many of you are starting something? It could be a startup, it could be a project, a new hobby. Oh, wow, almost everybody. Well, so I think the story that I'm going to share with you today, it's a very personal one that happened to me about a decade ago now, may apply to many of you. And it's actually a story that I carry with me almost every day as I'm working on LaunchBit. So let's flash back about 10 years ago. Wow, that was a long time ago. I was a senior in college, and it was the fall of 2003, October. And at that time, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do after graduation. And at the time, I thought, oh, well, you know, actually, I think I would really like to go to business school. And I wanted to visit a couple of schools in Boston, but I didn't have the money to fly from California to Boston. So I decided, well, let's see if we can try to get somebody else to pay for my trip. And it just so happens that every October, the largest job fair for jobs in Japan is held in Boston. I don't know why this is. The largest job fair for jobs in Japan is not held in Tokyo, and plenty of people fly from Tokyo to Boston to go to this job fair, and then they go back. So they are so large, they offer scholarships to their job fair, meaning that they will pay for your trip to go to their job fair. I was like, this is great. So I throw in an application, not really thinking that I would get it, but actually I got one of those scholarships, and so I went to Boston. And it was great. I had a great time, visited Jennifer, my co-founder, and I visited my schools. And in order to get my reimbursement for this trip, I had to go to the job fair for a couple of days. So I'm like, okay, well, whatever, I'll go to this job fair, don't have too much going on. And it just so happened that I got a job on the spot. So life kind of happens in weird ways. Fast forward a couple of months later, and I found out that I did not get into any of the business schools I applied to. And so I was really bummed. I mean, I didn't even get into one. But life goes on, and I was trying to figure out, well, what should I do? Well, I have this job offer that's just sort of lying around. Maybe I should take it. And I had never actually thought about working in Japan before until this job offer came along. So, you know, I went from, you know, kind of being excited about getting this job and being bummed that I didn't get into business school, but then I was kind of excited to take the job. So I took the job. Graduation happens, fast forward, and it's fall 2004, and I'm packing my bags and saying my goodbyes and moving to Tokyo. And I've never lived in Tokyo before. Tokyo is a very, very different place. So the first month was just crazy in terms of getting acclimated. You know, everything. So on the personal front, I was trying to set up a bank account, but they won't let you set up a bank account unless you have the right working papers, and I was trying to get an apartment, but of course no apartment will take you unless you have money in your bank account, which I didn't have. And so just trying to get everything figured out, and meanwhile trying to meet people and whatnot. And then on the work front, you know, the very first day I got to the office and turned on the computer, went into my email account, my work email account. I have to admit that I took one look, and even though I had studied Japanese for 10 years, I was like, oh boy, I can't read any of these. Maybe none of them are for me, I'll just delete them all. That probably was some foreshadowing for what would come next. I went through sales training at this job, and so more specifically, this job was a sales office, and the very first rotation I was going to do was customer support for our software product, of course in Japanese. And sales and customer support in Japanese is very formal. It's a totally different language almost than what you might use on the streets in Tokyo just talking with your. So I had to go through this training of several weeks, not only learning this extra, you know, set of language, if you will, but also I had to figure out, you know, where do you sit and stand in company meetings. In fact, there's a whole hierarchy of where you should sit and stand, whether you're in an elevator or a taxi cab or in a meeting room. It all differs depending on your rank and who your customers are and all that. So I was trying to learn all this, trying to process all this, and I was really struggling. So about a month or two into this job, you can imagine what happened next. My boss pulled me aside and was like, Elizabeth, this isn't going to work out. And you know, there are some moments in your life where there's just something that's so devastating, but you could have predicted it, but just so devastating that you didn't want to hear somebody say those words. And then when they do, like the first second, your heart just drops and you're like, oh my gosh, this is really happening to me. And then after that, you're trying to figure out, like, why is this happening to me? Like, here I am, my first job out of college, and I'm already getting the boot, and it's like only 1 month, and I don't really think I'm that incompetent. But the company was really nice about it. It's actually an American company, and their headquarters is actually here in the US. So they said, you know what, it's no problem. You can just transfer to the US. You just can't stay here, pretty much. So I did have actually, you know, a job transfer on the table. I could have moved to their headquarters. But they said, you know what, we understand you just moved here, it's fine. We can keep you on our P&L for about a year or so, and you can figure out what you want to do and if you want to take the transfer. So that was nice. I got to stay around, and they moved me off of customer emails, which I couldn't read anyway. And then I was trying to figure out what to do. And so this is towards the end of the fall of December 2004, and I said, okay, well, you know, this job, I need to figure out what to do next. I was still really bummed about the job situation, and so I said, okay, well, what did I want to do before? Well, I wanted to go to business school. This time, I only had time to put in one application. That's not something I would generally recommend to people, but I only had I only had enough time to put in one application, and I thought very deeply about which school I really liked the most, and that was MIT Sloan, and so I sent off my one application. And in fact, I had so little time, I didn't even have time to change any of my essays, except for maybe the date, and I didn't have time to get new recommendations, because I didn't think it'd be fair to find people and ask them to write me a letter in 2 days. And in fact, it all kind of worked out because the questions were the same as the prior year except for one, which I had to write a new essay for. And that one question was, what happened to you in the last year? And so I was like, oh, well, let me tell you. And so I submitted that application not really thinking that anything would happen because I had just failed to get into business school the prior year. I mean, nothing had really changed in terms of my application. But lo and behold, a week later, I get an email that says, MIT Sloan has a message awaiting you. So I click it, and I'm like, oh gosh, like this is going to be bad news. How could they look at my application so quickly? And it turned out that I got in. And I was so ecstatic, and I was checking this email at work that I wanted to just like jump off my chair for joy, but of course I had to subdue myself. And so, you know, here we are, like fast forward again, fall of 2005 now. And I'm going to MIT Sloan, and everybody's introducing themselves and talking a little bit about their background. And I don't want to sound self-congratulatory, because this really isn't a big deal. But a bunch of my classmates are like, oh, wow, you're here at MIT Sloan and you're 23? Like, you must have done awesome things. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I am the biggest imposter ever, because the only reason I'm here is that I had these 2 failures that, you know, led me here. And if I hadn't failed twice, then I would not be here at all, for sure. And so, in reflecting back on that experience, I realized that actually failure and success are so coupled together. You can't have one without the other. Like, I wouldn't have gotten the job if I hadn't failed in getting to business school, and I wouldn't have gotten to business school if I hadn't failed at that job. And you know, as we go through life today, in building our startups or whatever project it is you're working on, just remember during those really, really down times where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we're going to make it, like I don't know what to do, that you have to go through that in order to really get to where you want to go. Thank you.